What happened to your high school bully? I had two. One ended up in jail for selling meth and beating his girlfriend. Good riddance. The other one went to college and became a chemical engineer. He messaged me on Facebook a while back and apologized for being a ditchy in high school, which I accepted. Has a wife and a kid now, seems to be doing good for himself, so I'm happy for him. He made the eth to sell to the other bully. To be fair, how else are you gonna get through an engineering program? Never really bullied me, but others he did. Always lived like no rules applied to him. Saw on the local news a couple years ago he got pulled over for something. Ended up in a high-speed chase. The cops did a pit maneuver and made him spin out. Diffit pulls a gun and fires at the cops, who in turn shot up his car and him dead. My dentist told me a story about his bully. Just after he opened his practice, he made an emergency appointment because of a cracked tooth. The dentist recognized him, but the bully didn't. Bully got in the chair, dentist said open wide, and started examining him. Then he said, "You don't recognize me, do you?" Bully said no the best he could with the dentist's tools in his mouth. "You used to bully me at school. You made my life hell, perfect timing." The bully apologized, and the dentist repaired his tooth. But imagine how he felt for those few seconds being absolutely powerless. Edit. This was in the UK in about 1992, when we didn't sue people for something that wasn't your fault. You made my life hell, I pitched dentist drill sound. She was popular in high school until the day she got high off spice with her cousin and then stabbed her cousin to death. She's in jail now. Her family is broken and she swears up and down she did it because God told her to. To be honest, I feel completely horrible for her family. They don't deserve the social backlash and the heartache. I was obese until I was almost 21. Every single person, girl and guy, that bullied me for my weight got fat. I'm now a size 5. It feels damn good to see them in public. My bully is now dating my older brother's bully. I wonder if they bully each other now. It's dysgenics, the opposite of eugenics. They will have genetically pure bully children soon. Beware. Dead. Both of them. One shot himself after he got into so much trouble he thought daddy couldn't bail him out. The other was doing 90 down a country road, drunk off his ass, and the road took a hard left and he didn't. Threw him through the windshield and killed on impact. Was involved in a motorcycle accident and suffered serious brain damage. Actually made him a much nicer person. That accident knocked the cunt out of him. He's part owner of an auto parts store I buy from. He's also the second baseman on my beer league softball team I coach. One of my players said they had a guy to fill in for a tournament, so needing bodies I agreed. My heart sank when he came strutting up. My player introduced me to him and he said yes Rothery, and I go way back. I made his life hell in high school. I don't think I'll be welcome to play, but thanks for the opportunity. He turned and started walking away and I called him back over. Told him that if he's half as good as he was when we were teenagers, he's welcome to play. He immediately agreed, and after the first game, which we won by the mercy rule, he had a long chat with me in the beer gardens. We are good friends now, and he has a permanent spot on my team. And yes, he is still as good as he was on high school. One of mine sniffed a lot of glue and ended up in a mental institution. He's still there last I heard. 2 others attacked me late one night while I was walking near my home. These 2 were constantly in trouble as juveniles. One caught 2 bullets in a fight and died. The other was stabbed to death in a fight. I'm 70 now. I lived a good life after those 2 encounters. Well, I never had a high school bully, but my elementary school bully and I are still neighbors. Apparently she stole money from her boyfriend and he came banging at her door and kicking it to get it back. I think her son is 3 or 4 and we are 19. She got a lower back tattoo when she was 12. My father knew she bullied me, but her parents don't, so her mother is always telling how nice I am and how she wishes her daughter and I were friends, so I could lead by example. One of them served time in prison for stabbing someone. Another tried spreading rumors that I went AWOL from the army and was living in Canada. I was able to confront that after I got back from the Gulf. We became best friends, and I'm going to be in his wedding next year. How did that come about? We started hanging out with the same group of people, eventually buried the hatchet, smoked a lot of weed together, and made a bunch of memories. Ah yes, the classic, smoke-eat brothers forging an unbreakable bond. We had various scraps for much of middle school. I hated him. He was a racist creep hurling various insults at me for laughs. I was the only dark boy in a rural town and hopelessly small. He took pot shots whenever he could, being so much bigger than me. We finally had a classic schoolyard brawl after school late in the winter. Surrounded by a dozen or so boys egging us on, we fought. I won with nothing more than a hard shove onto the frozen ground. His backpack spilled open and all his books and papers went flying out onto the snow-covered field alongside his will to fight. He stumbled away in sobs. The jocks nicknamed me Rocky after that fight, and I felt vindicated and proud. Now when I think back all those years ago, my heart breaks for him in countless ways. He was molested repeatedly by his adoptive parents less than a block away from my own home. He was picked on by other kids as well. We were both outcasts in our own separate ways, but he suffered far worse than I could ever imagine. He ended up in juvie then, later, in prison. I wish I could take back that fateful afternoon. Everyone here is fighting for their lives, facing all kinds of darkness, begging for a little light. I wasn't personally bullied by this individual, but many others were. He was good looking, athletic and dated the most popular girls in my school. Late one night, I stopped to look at a used sports car I was thinking of buying for my wife for our anniversary. Out he strolls, easily close to 300 pounds, wearing a short-sleeved shirt with a necktie. He's working the night shift at a used car dealership, and I had to bite my lip to suppress my smile. He wanted to start the financing paperwork on the spot, and I had the pleasure of informing him that I'd be paying cash for said car, and not borrowing money for a toy. Even though he lived across the street from me growing up, we both pretended not to recognize one another. It's happened several times. The majority of times they either wouldn't make eye contact with me, ignored me altogether, even if we happened to be hanging with the same group, or awkwardly smiled and went in for a disingenuous haven't seen you in so long hug. A couple times they confronted me and apologized. One time, the girl straight up stuck to a milder version of the same behavior and rolled her eyes at everything I said. Another time the guy asked me on a date. And another one I ran into at a pizza place she was working at, and we are now pretty good friends. Granted, I have yet to run into the worst of my bullies, and I'd be curious to see what happened if I did. People bullied me in high school mostly by spreading false rumors about me, though some in more insidious ways, but I do not look back on high school fondly. I own my own gym, and have for a few years now. I received a message one day from a familiar looking name on the business Facebook page from a woman asking to come try us out. We set it up. She comes in for an introduction. She's a very large and out of shape woman at this point. After about 5 minutes of working with her, it hits me that this lady used to be about half her current size and was an absolute B_ in her heyday. I decided not to bring it up to her as she appeared to be struggling in life and came to us in a time of need, and I took it, as I do with all of my clients, as a cry for help. Not to mention, I'm a grown man now, and that seemed pretty silly and insignificant in life today. Months later during one of the classes, I noticed her struggling real hard, so I go over to offer some encouragement. As I leaned down, to say something to her. I notice she's crying faintly to herself. She looks up at me and quietly says sorry for how nasty I was to you years ago and thank you for doing this for me. Turns out an old mutual friend told her about my place and she recognized me as the owner and came to me on purpose. No, not a story of revenge or attribution, but she reached out to someone she was terrible to and today she's repurposed and I find it to be quite inspiring. Not quite the same, but about 10 years ago I caught my dad screaming at the TV. This fucking a-hole got his own show. He was such a piece of it when we were kids. He would beat you up for your lunch money, push you for no good reason, take your toys, and based on the way he acts now it does not seem like he grew up much. He was talking about Paul Tuchel Sr. from American Choppers. Moved to a new school in 7th grade and was doing fine, making friends, good grades. Then somehow ran afoul of this bigger kid. He'd been held back a few times. Typical bully, pushed little kids into lockers, loved to torment girls, and ran with a pack of acolytes who adored and aped him. In Texas at the time, if a kid didn't like you, he called you out, challenged you to a fight after school. Well, Zed calls me out one day because I was a faggot from New York. Clueless me moved there from said New York, where people are civilized. I said, sure, okay. A few days later, in front of his acolytes and a small group of my friends, he proceeds to beat the shit out of me. It was 7th grade, so the damage wasn't excessive, mostly to my pride. Spent the rest of middle school known as one of the guys Zed beat the shit out of. Fast forward about 7 years, home from college, and going to the grocery store for mom. Who should I see bagging my goodies but Zed? Taking a look at him, I see a horrible scar running from the top of his head down around the back of his skull and neck, and under his shirt. His face lights up when he sees me, and he says, in slightly slurred speech, "Hey, didn't we go to school together? We are friends from school, right?" He walks with me out to the parking lot, and as we walk I learn that he had been hit by a car in high school while biking home one day. Accident required a half-dozen surgeries and had left Zed mentally impaired and a completely different person. He put my stuff in the car, shook my hand for a good 30 seconds, and kept asking me to come back and see me sometime. I had hated few people in my life to that point, and no one more than him. Almost cried driving home. I felt so bad for him and disgusted with myself for my previous hatred.